The magnetic storm struck Ned Harrison's ship like a hammer blow from an enraged deity. Warning lights flickered across his console as the vessel spiraled toward the crystalline surface of Cylon, its navigation system wailing in electronic agony. "Come on, baby, hold together," Ned muttered, his rough hands moving swiftly across the controls. The ship bucked beneath him, threatening to tear itself apart. Through the view screen, the planet's surface sparkled like a bed of shattered diamonds, both beautiful and perilous. Another surge rocked the ship, the primary stabilizers failing with a shriek of tortured metal. Ned's muscles strained against the G-forces as he battled to maintain control. His reputation for surviving impossible situations was about to be put to the ultimate test. "Emergency Landing Protocol Delta 7, he commanded. The computer chirped acknowledgement as backup systems activated. The crystalline landscape rushed up to meet him, a dazzling array of purple and blue spires that would shred his ship like tissue paper if he miscalculated. The ship's hull screamed as it scraped against a crystal formation. Ned's teeth rattled in his skull. He glimpsed a relatively flat area ahead, his one chance at survival. "This is going to hurt," he growled, yanking back on the controls. The ship's nose lifted at the last possible moment. Impact. The world turned to chaos as the vessel plowed through smaller crystals, sending a shower of glittering shards into the air. When the ship finally skidded to a stop, Ned sat motionless for several seconds, mentally checking his body parts. Everything seemed intact, though his pride had taken quite a beating. Computer damage report. Hull integrity at 62%, primary propulsion offline, secondary systems failing, emergency repairs required for space-worthiness. Ned sighed, unbuckling his harness. Fantastic. Another perfect landing by Lucky Harrison. He grabbed his emergency pack and environmental suit, checking the seals before heading to the airlock. The ship sensors indicated a breathable atmosphere, but he wasn't taking any chances. The crystalline landscape stretched to the horizon in every direction. A forest of geometric shapes in various shades of purple and blue. The local star cast rainbow refractions through the formations, creating an otherworldly light show. Under different circumstances, Ned might have appreciated the beauty. Right now he was more concerned with survival. He activated his handheld scanner, searching for the components he'd need for repairs. The device beeped, detecting unusual energy signatures nearby. Ned frowned at the readings. They suggested either valuable mineral deposits or a faint sound caught his attention. Something between a moan and a whisper. Ned's hand instinctively reached for his sidearm as he moved toward the source, weaving between towering crystal formations. He rounded a particularly large crystal spire and stopped dead in his tracks. In a small clearing lay the most beautiful woman, no, not woman, alien, he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep mesmerizing blue, almost luminescent in the refracted light. Despite her clearly alien nature, her form was remarkably human-like, with an elegance that made his breath catch. But what truly caught his attention was the crystalline shard protruding from her side, surrounded by what appeared to be silvery blood. Her eyes fluttered open as he approached. They were like liquid mercury with no visible pupils. Despite her obvious pain, there was an intensity in her gaze that made him hesitate. "Well," she said in perfect English. Her voice was musical despite its weakness. "Either I'm hallucinating or the universe has an interesting sense of humor." She attempted to sit up and immediately grimaced in pain. "Don't move," Ned commanded, dropping to his knees beside her and pulling out his medical scanner. "You're badly injured. Your powers of observation are remarkable," she said dryly, then coughed, silver droplets speckling her lips. "I don't suppose you're a doctor as well as a crash land engineer," Ned replied, studying the scanner readings. "But I've patched up enough crash victims to know my way around field medicine." He reached for his medkit, selecting several implements. "I'm Ned Harrison." "Tina," she managed, her mercury eyes fixed on his face, though that's not exactly the proper pronunciation. "Tina it is then," Ned said, preparing a stabilizing field generator. "This is going to hurt, but if I don't get that crystal out soon," he let the sentence hang. "By all means," she said, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "Just try not to enjoy it too much. We've only just met after all." Ned couldn't help but chuckle despite the seriousness of the situation. "I'll do my best to be a gentleman." He positioned the field generator ready. She nodded, her silver eyes never leaving his face. 3, 2, he activated the device on 1, simultaneously pulling the crystal shard free with a specialized extractor. Tina's back arched as she let out a cry of pain that shattered several nearby crystal formations. The sound reverberated through Ned's bones, making his teeth ache. Acting quickly, Ned applied a healing matrix to the wound. The advanced medical compound immediately began knitting together Tina's damaged tissue, the silvery blood flow already slowing. "I have to admit," Tina said through clenched teeth, "your bedside manner needs work." "Most of my patients are machines," Ned replied, monitoring the healing progress. "They complain less. How disappointing for you." Her eyes fluttered as the pain medications began to take effect. "You should know by saving my life you've initiated." But before she could finish, her eyes rolled back and she lost consciousness. Ned checked her vital signs, stable but weak. The healing matrix would need time to complete its work. He glanced at his ship in the distance, then back at his unconscious patient. He couldn't leave her here exposed to the elements. With careful movements, he lifted her surprisingly light form and began making his way back to his vessel. Inside the ship's small medical bay, Ned hooked Tina up to monitoring equipment and watched as her vital signs slowly strengthened. Her unconscious form seemed to glow faintly in the artificial light, her blue skin almost luminescent. He caught himself staring and quickly looked away, focusing instead on the medical readouts. A warning tone from the ship's computer interrupted his thoughts. "Multiple vessels detected entering orbit. Configuration matches known pirate signatures." "Perfect timing," Ned muttered. Moving to the bridge, the scanner showed 3 ships, definitely the type favored by Crystal Raiders. They must have detected his crash landing. He returned to the medical bay, checking on Tina. Her eyes were open, watching him with that unsettling mercury gaze. "We have company," he said. "The unfriendly kind, raiders," she replied, her voice stronger. "They come for the heart crystals." She attempted to sit up and this time succeeded with only a slight wince. "You shouldn't have saved me. Now you're bound by the ritual." "What ritual?" She reached out, touching his hand. An electric sensation shot up his arm and suddenly he could feel something. Emotions that weren't his own, thoughts that felt foreign yet somehow familiar. "By saving my life, you've initiated the bond of souls," Tina explained, her finger still touching his. "It's our most sacred tradition. When one saves another's life, their souls become intertwined." Ned pulled his hand away, breaking the strange connection. That's impossible. It was just basic medical attention." "The universe doesn't care about your intentions," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "The bond has begun. Soon you'll feel what I feel, know what I know." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're taking this rather well, considering I'm a bit busy worrying about the pirates about to land on our heads," Ned replied, checking the scanner again. The ships were beginning their descent. "We need to move." "Always so practical," Tina said, sliding off the medical bed. She moved with fluid grace despite her recent injury. "But you're right, the raiders cannot be allowed to find the heart crystal chamber." She stumbled slightly and Ned caught her arm to steady her. The moment their skin touched, that strange connection flared again. This time he caught fragments of memories, crystal spires singing with energy, ancient chambers deep underground, a sense of sacred duty. "Stop that," he said, letting go of her arm. "I'm not doing anything," she replied with a small smile. "The bond grows stronger by itself. Soon we won't need physical contact." The ship's proximity alarm blared, cutting her off. "The raiders were landing. We need weapons," Ned said, moving to a storage locker. "And a plan. We need to reach the sacred chamber before they do," Tina countered. "I can lead us there, but—" She swayed slightly. "I'm still weak." Ned handed her a small energy pistol, then checked his own weapon. "Then I guess we'll have to watch each other's backs." He paused, looking at her. "This bond thing, is there any way to undo it?" Something flickered across her mercury eyes. Pain, disappointment. "Would you want to?" Before he could answer, the sound of landing thrusters shook the ship. The raiders had arrived. Ned checked the external cameras. 3 ships had landed in a rough triangle around his crash site, and armored figures were already emerging. They carried heavy mining equipment alongside their weapons, clearly prepared to extract crystals by any means necessary. 8 hostiles, he reported, grabbing extra power cells for his weapon. Heavy armor, military-grade weapons, not your average crystal poachers. "They never are," Tina said grimly. She had regained some of her color, the blue of her skin deepening to a rich sapphire. "The heart crystals draw the worst kinds of attention." She moved to the ship's viewport, her movements liquid smooth despite her injury. "We need to reach the chamber before they locate it." "And where exactly is this chamber?" Tina pointed to a massive crystal formation in the distance, its peak disappearing into the clouds. "There. The Temple of Echoes." She turned to him, mercury eyes intense. Can you fight? I prefer to avoid it, Ned replied, checking his equipment one last time, but I'm good at it when necessary. It will be necessary. She handled her borrowed weapon with familiar ease. The raider won't hesitate to kill us both. An explosion rocked the ship. The raiders were trying to breach the hull. Ned grabbed Tina's arm, pulling her toward the emergency exit on the far side of the vessel. That strange connection flared again at the contact, and he caught a flash of her determination mixed with something else, something warmer. They slipped out of the ship just as the raiders breached the main airlock. The crystalline landscape provided plenty of cover, and they moved from formation to formation, keeping low. Hold, Tina whispered, pressing against a crystal spire. 2 raiders passed nearby, their heavy boots crunching on crystal shards. Ned found himself very aware of her proximity, the warmth of her body against his side. Focus, he told himself firmly. But then he heard Tina's amused voice in his mind. Too late for that. He shot her a startled look. She winked at him, then gestured forward. They needed to move. They made it halfway to the temple before everything went wrong. A raider patrol spotted them, and the air filled with plasma bolts. Ned pushed Tina behind cover, returning fire. His shot caught one raider in the chest, dropping him. Nice shot, Tina called out, firing her own weapon with surprising accuracy. But they're calling reinforcements. How do you know that? She tapped her temple. The bond. I can understand their language now through your knowledge of their communications. She ducked as a plasma bolt shattered the crystal above her head. We need to run now. They sprinted toward the temple, plasma fire cutting through the air around them. Ned felt a bolt graze his arm and heard Tina gasp. She had felt his pain through their connection. Almost there, she panted as they reached the temple's base. She pressed her hand against a seemingly solid crystal wall, and it shimmered, revealing a hidden entrance. Inside, they dove through just as the raiders opened up with heavy weapons. The entrance sealed behind them, leaving them in a softly glowing crystal corridor. Tina leaned against a wall, catching her breath. The chamber is deeper inside, but she looked at him with those mesmerizing mercury eyes. Before we go further, you should know something. Once we enter the heart crystal chamber, the bond between us will strengthen exponentially. There's no going back after that. Ned touched his wounded arm, feeling the sting. Do we have a choice? There's always a choice, she said softly. But the raiders will breach this entrance soon. The heart crystals cannot fall into their hands. They power more than just this planet. They're part of an ancient network that spans galaxies. Above them, they could hear the raiders setting up heavy mining equipment. Time was running out. Well then, Ned said, managing a grin, lead the way. After all, I've already crashed my ship and gotten shot at today. Might as well add mystical alien bond to the list. Tina's answering smile was radiant. You know, for a human, you're taking this remarkably well. They don't call me lucky for nothing, he replied, as they started deeper into the temple. Though I'm starting to think that nickname needs updating. The heart crystal chamber pulsed with living light, casting shifting shadows across the ancient walls. Ned watched as Tina moved among the massive crystals, her blue skin seeming to glow in resonance with their energy. They had sealed themselves inside the chamber, but the sounds of the raiders' mining equipment still echoed from above. These crystals, Tina explained, touching one reverently. They're not just power sources, they're alive in their own way. They remember through their strengthening bond. Ned felt her connection to the crystals, a sensation like music without sound, light without vision. That's incredible, he managed, fighting vertigo from the alien sensations flooding his mind. You're adapting quickly, she observed, moving closer. Most outsiders can't handle even this level of connection without going mad. Lucky me, Ned muttered, then caught her amused glance. Yes, I know the nickname's getting old. A particularly loud explosion shook crystal dust from the ceiling. Tina's expression hardened. They're getting closer. We need to prepare. She gestured to a series of crystal control panels. Can you understand these? Ned approached the panels, surprised to find that he could. The symbols seemed to shift in his vision, becoming comprehensible. Through your knowledge, he realized. I'm seeing them through your understanding. And I, Tina said, picking up his discarded toolkit, suddenly know exactly how to recalibrate a Mark VII plasma inducer. She held up a tool. Though I still think your human technology is charmingly primitive. Primitive? Ned raised an eyebrow. My primitive technology saved your life, and my mystical bond is currently keeping us both alive, she countered, then tilted her head curiously. Why does that bother you? The intimacy of sharing knowledge. Ned focused on the control panel, avoiding her mercury gaze. Humans, we're private creatures. We're not used to someone else in our heads, yet you share your body so casually, Tina observed. I've seen it in your memories, physical intimacy without spiritual connection. It seems incomplete. Heat crept up Ned's neck. We're not discussing my memories of physical intimacy. Why not? I find human mating rituals fascinating, especially the part where another explosion cut her off. Closer this time, the raiders were getting through the temple's defenses. Focus, Ned said firmly, though he couldn't quite suppress a smile. What are our options? Tina placed her hand on a central crystal which brightened at her touch. The chamber's defenses are strong but not invincible. We need to. The ceiling exploded. Raiders rappelled down through the breach, weapons blazing. Ned dove for cover, pulling Tina with him as plasma bolts scorched the ancient walls. Through their bond he felt her fear and determination mingling with his own. The crystals, she shouted. Don't let them touch the heart crystals. Ned fired from behind a crystal formation, his shots precise. 2 raiders fell, but more kept coming. He felt Tina's presence in his mind, guiding his aim, showing weak points in the raiders' armor that he couldn't have known about. They fought well together, moving in perfect synchronization. When Ned's weapon ran dry, Tina tossed him a fresh power cell before he could even ask. When a raider tried to flank her, Ned was already there, dropping him with a well-placed shot. But they were outnumbered. A massive raider in heavy armor stomped forward carrying what looked like mining charges. Last chance, he growled through his helmet. Step aside, we're taking the crystals. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Tina said, her voice carrying strange harmonics that made the crystals hum. These aren't just power sources, they're part of something greater. The raider laughed. Credits are credits, sweetheart. Nothing personal. He raised his weapon. Time seemed to slow. Through their bond, Ned saw what Tina was about to do, felt her gathering energy from the crystals. No, he shouted, but it was too late. The raider fired. Ned threw himself in front of Tina, feeling white-hot agony as the plasma bolt tore through his chest. He collapsed, the world going dark at the edges. The last thing he saw was Tina's face, her mercury eyes blazing with power. The crystals around them erupted with blinding light, and he heard the raiders screaming. Then darkness took him. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by strange sensations. Ned felt like he was floating in a sea of light, anchored only by Tina's presence in his mind. Her consciousness enveloped his, keeping him from drifting away completely. Stay with me, her thoughts whispered. Let the crystals heal you. He became aware of his body gradually. The pain in his chest had been replaced by a tingling warmth. He could feel energy flowing through him, remaking him cell by cell. It should have been terrifying, but Tina's presence made it feel right. When Ned finally opened his eyes, he found himself suspended in a matrix of crystal energy. Tina stood before him, her hands pressed against the crystal surface, her face intense with concentration. The chamber around them was empty, no sign of the raiders except some scorched armor pieces. What? His voice felt strange in his throat. What did you do? What was necessary? Tina replied, her voice strained. The bond, it let me channel the crystal's full power. The raiders were removed. Ned tried to move and found that he could. The crystal matrix released him gently to his feet. He looked down at his chest where the plasma bolt had struck. There was no wound, not even a scar, but something felt different. You're changing, Tina said softly. The crystal energy, it's transforming you, making you like me. She stumbled slightly, exhausted from the healing effort. Ned caught her, and the contact sent a shock through them both. The bond had grown exponentially stronger. He could feel everything she felt, see memories that weren't his own. Centuries of Orion history, the secrets of the crystals, the weight of her responsibility as their guardian. This is, he struggled to find words. Overwhelming, Tina suggested, steadying herself but not moving away from his touch. Try being on my end. Human emotions are so intense. You feel everything so strongly. Ned looked at his hands in the crystal light. He could see a faint blue tinge beginning to spread across his skin. So I'm becoming Orion? The process has begun, she confirmed. The bond between us combined with the crystal energy that saved your life. Your human form couldn't contain it. She touched his face gently. I'm sorry, I had no choice, you were dying. Through their connection he felt her genuine regret mixed with hope. Yes, hope that he wouldn't reject this change, reject her. How long? He asked. Days, perhaps. The transformation is progressive. She hesitated. It can be reversed, but only in these early stages, and it would mean breaking our bond completely. The thought sent a spike of pain through them both. The connection between them had become too deep, too essential, like trying to separate two intertwined streams. And if I don't reverse it, Tina's mercury eyes met his. Then you become part of my world, part of the crystal network, part of, she paused, part of me. More memories flowed between them, her years of solitude as guardian, the weight of her duties, the loneliness she'd never admitted to anyone. And underneath it all, a growing feeling neither of them was ready to name. The chamber trembled slightly. Above, they could hear more ships landing. "Reinforcements," Ned said grimly. "They'll have better equipment this time, bigger weapons." Tina straightened, her exhaustion falling away. "Then we better come up with a plan. Your human tactical thinking combined with my crystal knowledge." A slight smile curved her lips. "We might actually survive this." "Such optimism," Ned commented dryly. But he was already analyzing the chamber's defenses with new understanding, seeing possibilities he couldn't have imagined hours ago. "I learned it from you," Tina replied. "Now shall we show these raiders why it's a bad idea to attack a bonded pair of crystal guardians? We're going to need weapons," Ned said, then caught her thought before she could speak. "The crystal repository, down that corridor. Having you in my head is going to take some getting used to," she said, leading the way. "Especially since you keep thinking about that physical intimacy discussion we never finished." "Focus," Ned muttered, feeling heat rise to his increasingly blue-tinted face. Raiders first, awkward cultural discussions later. Tina's laughter echoed through both their minds as they headed deeper into the temple, preparing for the battle to come. The raiders above had no idea what they were about to face. A human becoming Orion, guided by crystal wisdom, armed with knowledge of two worlds. And through it all, their bond continued to grow stronger, weaving their souls together until it became impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The second wave of raiders proved more formidable than the first. They came with shield generators and crystal cutting equipment designed to bypass the temple's defenses. But they hadn't counted on facing two minds working as one. Armed with weapons drawn from the temple's ancient arsenals, Ned and Tina moved like dancers through the crystalline corridors, their actions perfectly synchronized. Crystal weapons hummed in their hands, sending pulses of pure energy that bypassed the raiders' shields. Through their bond, they anticipated each other's moves before they happened. "Their shields are adapting," Ned called out, feeling the tactical analysis flow between them. His skin had taken on a definite blue tinge now, and he could feel the crystals singing to him just as they did to Tina. "Then we adapt faster," Tina replied, her hands moving in complex patterns. The crystals around them pulsed in response, creating geometric patterns of deadly energy. The battle raged through the temple's upper levels, neither side willing to yield. But gradually, the raiders began to fall back, overwhelmed by the coordinated defense. Their weapons proved useless against the crystal barriers Tina erected, while Ned's tactical knowledge helped them outmaneuver every assault. Finally, the last raiders retreated, leaving their wounded behind. The temple fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the crystals. Ned leaned against a wall, exhausted. The transformation was accelerating. He could feel it in every cell of his body. His vision had started to change, the world taking on new dimensions of color and energy he'd never imagined existed. "It's happening faster than I expected," Tina said, watching him with concern. "The battle must have accelerated the process." She touched his face gently. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm being unmade and remade with every breath," Ned replied honestly. Through their bond, he knew she could feel the strange mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. "Is this what being Orion feels like all the time? This awareness of everything? We are creatures of energy as much as matter," she explained. "The crystals are part of us, and we are part of them. It's why the raiders could never truly understand what they were trying to steal." A spasm racked Ned's body, bringing him to his knees. Tina caught him, her touch sending cascades of sensation through their shared consciousness. "The next few hours will be critical," she said softly. "Your human form is fighting the change. If you want to stop this, to reverse it, it has to be now. Later will be too late." Ned looked at his hands, now almost as blue as Tina's. Through their bond, he could feel the networks of crystal energy spanning the galaxy, waiting to be awakened. He could feel Tina's hopes and fears, her loneliness and her growing feelings for him. And he could feel his own humanity like a fading echo. He struggled to stand. "I need time to think," Tina nodded, though he felt her heart clench. "Of course, but remember, the raiders will return and next time they'll bring an army." As if to emphasize her point, distant explosions echoed from above. The raiders had retreated, but they weren't giving up. The heart crystals were too valuable a prize. Ned stared into the shifting crystal lights, feeling his body continue its transformation, knowing he stood at a crossroads. Remain human and lose this incredible connection, or embrace the change and become something entirely new. Behind him, Tina waited silently, but through their bond her emotion spoke volumes. The choice was his, but the consequences would affect them both. The crystals sang their ancient songs, and overhead the raiders prepared for their final assault. The first tremors caught them off guard. The crystal chamber shuddered, and hairline fractures appeared in several of the smaller forms. Through their bond, Ned felt Tina's sudden spike of alarm. "The raiders' mining equipment," she said, pressing her hand against a central crystal. "They've destabilized the entire network." Ned could feel it too now. The complex web of energy that connected every crystal on Cylon was starting to unravel. His partially transformed body resonated with the disturbance, sending waves of discomfort through him. "How bad?" he asked, though through their connection he already knew the answer. "Catastrophic," Tina replied, her mercury eyes reflecting the flickering crystal light. "If the network fails completely, the chain reaction will tear the planet apart." Another tremor, stronger this time. Crystal shards rained from the ceiling as the raiders continued their assault above. But Ned's attention was drawn to something else. Patterns in the energy flow that his hybrid perspective allowed him to see. "Look," he said, moving to the central control matrix. "The energy isn't just destabilizing. It's reorganizing itself like a computer system rebooting after a power surge." Tina's eyes widened as she followed his reasoning through their bond. "You're right, your human analytical perspective. You're seeing patterns we Orions have taken for granted for centuries. We can use that," Ned said, his fingers dancing across the crystal controls with growing confidence. "If we redirect the energy flow, create new pathways, it could work," Tina agreed, taking position at another control panel. "But the power required, it would complete your transformation instantly. There would be no going back." Their eyes met across the chamber. In that moment, through their bond, centuries of Orion memories flowed between them. The loneliness of being crystal guardians, the weight of protecting something so vast and ancient, the yearning for connection that had driven Tina's people to create the bond ritual in the first place. Another violent tremor rocked the chamber above. They could hear the raiders' heavy equipment grinding closer. "We're out of time," Tina said softly. "Ned, I can still reverse your transformation. Send you back to your world, your life. You don't have to." "Tina," he interrupted, a slight smile on his now distinctly blue-tinted face. "Stop talking and help me save this planet." Joy surged through their bond as they moved in perfect synchronization. Ned's hands flew across the crystal controls, redirecting energy flows based on his unique hybrid understanding of the network. Tina's deeper connection to the crystals provided the raw power they needed, channeling it through new pathways as fast as Ned could create them. The chamber filled with blinding light as the network began to stabilize. Ned felt the final stages of his transformation accelerate, his body and mind expanding to encompass his new reality. The pain was intense, but Tina's presence in his mind helped him through it. Above them, the raiders' equipment suddenly went silent. Through their bond, Ned and Tina could feel the stabilized crystal network projecting a protective field around the entire temple. Nothing would breach those walls now. As the light faded, Ned examined his fully transformed body. His skin had taken on the deep blue tone of an Orion, and his eyes, when he caught their reflection in a crystal face, shimmered with mercury light. "How do you feel?" Tina asked, moving closer. "Like myself," he replied, surprised to find it was true. "Just more." She touched his face gently. "There's something else you should know." Through their bond, she began to share a larger truth. Images of other crystal worlds, a vast network spanning the galaxy now lying dormant and damaged. The Orions were never meant to be guardians of just one world. "We were part of something greater. The network needs to be restored," Ned said, understanding flowing between them. "And our bond, the combination of Orion crystal wisdom and human innovation, makes us uniquely suited to the task," Tina finished. "If you're willing." Ned looked around the chamber that had changed his life in so many ways. "Well," he said with a grin, "I always did want to see the galaxy." 6 months later, a sleek crystal ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its organic design drawing stunned looks from traffic control operators at Kennedy Spaceport. "Are you sure about this?" Tina asked, fidgeting with her environmental suit settings for the 100th time. Her normally graceful movements were made awkward by her swollen belly. Carrying a hybrid child had proved to be an interesting challenge. "They're my parents," Ned replied, guiding the ship to its landing pad. "Besides, Mom's been sending increasingly threatening messages since she found out she's going to be a grandmother. But what if they don't?" "I mean, I'm blue." Tina's mercury eyes were wide with genuine concern. "Trust me, The blue skin is the least of what they'll want to talk about, Ned grinned. Wait until Dad starts asking about crystal-powered propulsion systems. The ship settled onto the pad with barely a whisper. Through their bond, Ned felt Tina's mix of anxiety and excitement. Her hand went to her stomach automatically when the baby kicked. "Stop teaching our child engineering principles before it's even born," she muttered. "Hey, that's all you. I'm just providing the human perspective on quantum mechanics." They emerged from the ship to find Ned's parents already waiting. His mother, a small, energetic woman with graying hair, practically bounced with anticipation. His father, tall and professorial, was trying very hard to look dignified while obviously itching to examine the crystal ship. "Nathan Edward Harrison," his mother called out, using his full name. 6 months. 6 months without a proper visit, and then we find out through a military channel that you're married and expecting and she finally got a good look at Tina and stopped short. "Hi, Mom," Ned said casually. "Dad, this is Tina, my wife, and yes, she's blue, and yes, she's carrying your grandchild, and no, this isn't a joke or a dream." Tina stepped forward awkwardly, trying to manage a formal Orion greeting while dealing with her altered center of gravity. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. I apologize for the unexpected nature of—" Oof, she was cut off by Ned's mother wrapping her in a surprisingly strong hug. "Oh, look at you. How far along are you? Have you been eating enough? Earth food doesn't disagree with you, does it? We need to get you sitting down right away." "Mom," Ned tried to interrupt. "She's fine. We have excellent medical—" "Hush you," his mother said, already guiding Tina toward the terminal. "You lost all say in this when you disappeared for 6 months and came back blue and married." She patted Tina's arm. "Now, dear, tell me everything and don't leave out a single detail about how my son finally managed to settle down." Through their bond, Ned felt Tina's relief and amusement. "Your mother is exactly like your memory suggested," she thought to him. "Wait until she starts showing you baby pictures," he replied. Meanwhile, his father had been slowly circling the crystal ship, making small sounds of academic excitement. "Son," he finally said, "I don't suppose you'd be willing to explain how this propulsion system works for purely theoretical purposes, of course." "Sorry, Dad, classified Galactic Guardian business." Ned clapped his father on the shoulder. "But I might have brought you some crystal samples to study." His father's eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning as they followed the women inside. Ned felt contentment flow through his bond with Tina. They had a galaxy to heal, a child to raise, and 2 worlds to bridge. But right now, watching his blue-skinned wife being fussed over by his very human mother, Ned knew they could handle anything the universe threw at them. "By the way," his father said casually, "your mother's already planned the baby shower. I hope you're ready for some very interesting gifts from your old engineering colleagues." Ned groaned. Through their bond, he heard Tina's musical laughter. "Welcome to family life, my love. Dear friends, thank you for joining this journey through the crystalline world of Cylon with Ned and Tina. Their story reminds us that love can transcend not just cultural boundaries, but the very boundaries of what makes us human. Sometimes the greatest adventures and the deepest connections come when we're brave enough to let ourselves be transformed by love. I'm grateful you stayed with me through every twist and turn, every crystal-lit corridor, and every moment of discovery. Your willingness to imagine these new worlds makes telling these stories worthwhile. Remember that like the heart crystals of Cylon, the connections we forge with each other can light up entire worlds. Whether you're human, Orion, or something in between, there's magic in being understood and accepted for who you are. Until our next adventure among the stars, with warmest regards, your storyteller.